The massive crystal screens in the Luminary Federation's Central Command lit up with emergency alerts. 3 entire colony systems had gone dark in the past week. Ambassador Reed's silvery skin paled to an almost transparent white as he watched the latest footage from their outermost colony, New Dawn. "Play it again," he ordered, his 4-fingered hand trembling as he gripped the edge of the command console. The recording showed a massive swarm of crystalline shapes moving through space, their jagged edges glinting in the light of New Dawn's twin suns. They moved with purpose, consuming everything in their path: ships, stations, and even asteroids. The footage ended abruptly as the recording station itself was torn apart. How many citizens were on New Dawn? Reed asked, though he dreaded the answer. 8 million, replied First Speaker Lux, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with distress. "We managed to evacuate about 30% before losing contact." Reed closed his inner eyelids, trying to process the magnitude of their crisis. The Luminary had spent thousands of years developing their society around diplomacy and peaceful cooperation. Their greatest achievements were in art, science, and interstellar communication. Their weapons were designed only for defense, and their ships prioritized comfort over combat capability. They were not prepared for this. "What do we know about these entities?" Reed asked, turning to the gathered council of speakers. Third Speaker Glow stepped forward, his research robes shimming with nervous energy. "They appear to be silicon-based life forms, or possibly artificial constructs. Our scans show they operate as a collective, sharing information instantly across their crystalline network. Our defensive measures," he paused, mandibles clicking in frustration, "they simply had no effect. Energy weapons are absorbed, and our barrier technology fails against their unique quantum structure." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Luminary Federation, one of the oldest civilizations in the known galaxy, was helpless against this threat. "There is one option we haven't considered," First Speaker Lux said carefully. Her suggestion patterns began pulsing beneath her skin, showing both hope and apprehension. Reed immediately understood what she was suggesting. "The Deathworlders. But we've always avoided contact with them. Their very nature might be exactly what we need," Lux interrupted. "We've all seen the reports. They come from a planet with crushing gravity, extreme temperature variations, and constant natural disasters. Their ships are built like fortresses because they evolved expecting the universe to try to kill them at every turn. But they're aggressive, primitive." Third Speaker Glow protested. "They still use kinetic weapons. Their first response to any problem is to solve it with force. And right now," Lux responded firmly, "we need that kind of thinking. Our peaceful approaches have failed. Our advanced energy weapons are useless. Perhaps it's time to try something primitive." Reed looked back at the screen showing the advancing crystal swarm. Their projections showed the entities would reach the Federation's core worlds within 3 standard months. They had already lost contact with 15 million citizens. "The humans," Reed said slowly, "at least have experience fighting against seemingly impossible odds. Their entire history is filled with stories of overcoming catastrophic threats." First Speaker Lux moved to the central communication array, her decision made. "We will send out a general distress call on all frequencies, including those monitored by the human fleets. We'll broadcast in their language as well as standard galactic common." "And if they ignore us?" Third Speaker Glow asked. "From what we know of humans," Reed replied, remembering his studies of their culture, "they won't. They have a strange compulsion to help others in need, even at great risk to themselves. They call it being human." The message was prepared and broadcast across the galaxy. For the first time in their long history, the Luminary Federation admitted they couldn't solve a problem through peaceful means. They needed warriors, and they were about to call upon the most formidable warriors they knew: the Deathworlders of Earth. Admiral James Stone stood on the bridge of the UES Thunder, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic display showing the distress signal. Around him, the bridge crew worked in focused silence, their movements precise and practiced. The Thunder, like all human ships, was built like a floating fortress, thick armor plates, redundant systems, and enough firepower to level a small continent. "Play it again," Stone ordered, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years in space. The message flickered to life. "This is an emergency broadcast from the Luminary Federation to all spacefaring races. Our outer colonies are under attack by unknown crystalline entities. Conventional defenses have failed. We request immediate military assistance. Coordinates attached. Please, we have already lost 15 million lives." Stone's executive officer, Tom Wright, stepped forward. "Sir, the Luminary. Aren't they the ones who called us barbaric last year when we demonstrated our railgun technology?" "The same ones." Stone nodded, a slight smile crossing his face. "Funny how quick opinions change when you need someone to fight your battles." He walked to the tactical display, where red dots showed the projected path of the crystal swarm. The Perseus arm stretched out before them, and somewhere out there, millions of aliens were about to learn why humans had earned their reputation as Deathworlders. "Send word to all ships in the fleet," Stone commanded. "Battle stations, we're responding to the distress call." The bridge erupted into activity. Warning klaxons sounded throughout the massive ship as crew members rushed to their posts. The Thunder's engines hummed to life, their deep vibration familiar to everyone aboard. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're getting messages from other human fleets. The Mars Defense Force is sending 3 battle groups. The Pacific Alliance is deploying their carrier fleet. Even the independent colonies are mobilizing." Stone wasn't surprised. Humans might fight among themselves, but they always united when facing an external threat. Besides, no human could ignore a cry for help. It went against their very nature. "How long until we reach the luminary colony of New Dawn?" Stone asked. "At maximum burn, 18 hours. The navigation officer responded. "We'll be the first responders." Stone nodded, already planning the battle ahead. Human ships were designed to function in conditions that would kill most alien species. Their hulls could withstand impacts that would shatter other vessels. Their weapons were primitive, but extremely effective. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways. "Begin combat preparations," he ordered. "I want all railguns charged and missile tubes loaded. Power up the point defense systems, and get me everything we have on crystalline-based life forms." As the crew carried out his orders, Stone received another message. This one was from Earth Command. "Admiral Stone, you are authorized to use any means necessary to assist the Luminary Federation. Show them why humanity survives on a death world." The message brought back memories of his childhood on Earth, where every day was a battle against nature itself. Earthquakes, hurricanes, extreme temperatures. Earth had thrown everything at humanity, and humanity had not just survived but thrived. "Send a message to the Luminary," Stone commanded. "Tell them the Deathworlders are coming. Tell them to hold on." The Thunder's engines roared louder as the massive ship accelerated. Behind it, 15 other human warships fell into formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. They looked nothing like the sleek, elegant ships of the Luminary. These were warships, built by people who understood that sometimes survival meant being ready to fight. As they entered FTL speed, Stone looked at the galactic map one more time. He had fought pirates, rogue allies, and natural disasters in space. But this would be humanity's first real chance to prove themselves to the galactic community. These crystal creatures were about to learn a hard lesson. Never underestimate species that evolved on a death world. The Luminary Defense Station over New Dawn was falling apart piece by piece. Ambassador Reed watched in horror from the command center as crystal entities tore through the station's outer rings. The station's shields, once thought impenetrable, might as well have been made of paper. Unknown ships detected. A young luminary officer called out suddenly. 16 vessels, approaching at high speed. Reed rushed to the view screen. The ships that appeared were unlike anything he had ever seen. Where luminary vessels were elegant and sleek, these were dark, angular, and covered in what looked like battle scars. They bristled with what his scanners identified as primitive projectile weapons and thick armor plating. "The Deathworlders actually came," he whispered. The human fleet dropped out of FTL speed right in the middle of the battle zone. The crystal entities immediately turned their attention to these new arrivals, perhaps sensing the threat they posed. Inside the UES Thunder, Admiral Stone stood calmly as his bridge crew reported on the situation. "Sir, the crystal swarm is changing direction. They're coming right at us." "Good," Stone smiled. "That's exactly what we wanted. All ships, battle formation Delta. Show these creatures how humans fight." The human fleet spread out in a perfect combat pattern that they had practiced countless times. The crystal entities rushed forward, expecting these ships to fall as easily as the luminary vessels had. They were wrong. The first crystal being slammed into the Thunder's hull at full speed, expecting to tear through it like it had done with luminary ships. Instead, there was a deafening clang that echoed through the ship. The creature bounced off the reinforced hull, leaving barely a scratch. "Hull integrity at 98%, reported the damage control officer. "These things are strong, but our armor is stronger." Stone's voice was steady as he gave his next order. "All ships, weapons free. Let's show them what primitive technology can do." The space around New Dawn lit up with fire. Railguns spat hypersonic rounds at the crystal beings. Point defense systems tracked and engaged multiple targets simultaneously. Missile batteries launched salvos of weapons designed to crack open asteroids. On the luminary station, Reed couldn't believe what he was seeing. The humans were fighting in vacuum like they were born to it. Their ships took hits that would have destroyed luminary vessels and kept fighting. Their weapons, while technologically simple, were devastating against the crystal entities. "Ambassador," a human voice came through his comm system. "This is Admiral Stone. We're going to clear a path to your station. Be ready to evacuate your people. These creatures don't like our kinetic weapons very much." Reed watched as a human ship positioned itself between the station and the largest cluster of crystal entities. The ship's sides opened up, revealing rows of massive gun barrels. The weapons began to fire, filling space with a wall of high-velocity projectiles. Crystal entities shattered under the impact. Those that survived pulled back, seemingly confused by an enemy they couldn't easily destroy. "Impossible," one of Reed's officers whispered. "They're actually hurting them." "Not impossible," Reed corrected, understanding dawning in his mind. "They're Deathworlders. Their entire history is about surviving the impossible." The human fleet moved with surprising grace for such bulky ships, forming a defensive perimeter around the station. Their point defense systems created an interlocking field of fire that the crystal entities couldn't penetrate. "This is why we needed them," Reed realized. "The humans don't just survive in hostile conditions. They thrive in them. They turn danger into advantage." As if to prove his point, the Thunder accelerated directly toward a cluster of crystal entities, its guns blazing. The entities scattered, experiencing what might have been their first taste of fear. The battle for New Dawn was far from over, but for the first time since the crisis began, the Luminary felt something they had almost forgotten: hope. The Deathworlders hadn't just responded to their call. They had brought with them humanity's greatest gift: the ability to face impossible odds and win. Commander Lisa West stood in the airlock of her assault ship, the UES Striker, wearing a heavy combat suit. Around her, 20 other human soldiers checked their magnetic boots and weapon systems. Unlike the Luminary, who saw space as something to be protected from, humans had learned to fight in it. "Remember," she said through the tactical comm, "these crystal things aren't used to dealing with species that can actually fight back. Let's show them why that was a mistake." The airlock cycled open, exposing them to the vacuum of space. The battle raged around them, human ships trading fire with crystal entities, debris floating everywhere, and the damaged luminary station hanging in the background. West pushed off from the airlock, her magnetic grapple ready. Team 1 with me. We're boarding the damaged crystal cluster. Through her helmet's display, she watched as Admiral Stone's fleet kept most of the crystal swarm busy. This gave her team the opening they needed. They flew through space, using their suit thrusters to dodge debris and crystal fragments. The crystal entity they targeted was massive, about the size of a small ship. Its surface was cracked from railgun hits, but it was still moving. As West got closer, she saw something interesting through the cracks. Mechanical components. All units, this is Commander West, she broadcast. These things aren't just crystals, they're machines. Look for weak points in the crystal structure. Aim for the gaps. Her team landed on a crystal entity's surface, magnetic boots locking them in place. The creature tried to shake them off, but humans were used to holding on in much worse conditions. They placed demolition charges in the cracks, then pushed off to a safe distance. The explosion shattered the crystal shell, exposing complex machinery beneath. The entity's movements became erratic. Admiral Stone, West called, "These things have mechanical cores. The crystal is just armor. If we can crack it, they're vulnerable." On the Thunder's bridge, Stone immediately understood the implications. All ships adjust targeting parameters. Focus fire on any damaged crystal surfaces. Let's pierce their armor. The battle shifted. Human ships began targeting already damaged crystal entities, their weapons now much more effective. The crystal swarm, for the first time, showed signs of confusion. Their perfect coordination started to break down. Inside the luminary station, Ambassador Reed watched in amazement. The humans weren't just fighting. They were adapting, learning, finding ways to be more effective. Their primitive approach of actually examining their enemy up close had revealed a weakness that all of the luminary's advanced scanning technology had missed. West and her team moved from entity to entity, planting charges at weak points. Other human ships began launching their own boarding teams. The crystal swarm, designed to fight ships, had no defense against soldiers who could operate in vacuum. "Look at them go," Reed said to his staff. "They're treating space itself as a battlefield." The battle reached its peak when West's team breached a particularly large crystal entity. Inside, they found what looked like a control center. "Admiral, we found something. These things aren't just machines, they're drones. They're being controlled from somewhere." This discovery changed everything. The humans weren't just fighting monsters anymore. They were fighting technology, and technology could be beaten. As the battle continued, more crystal entities fell to the combined assault of ship weapons and boarding teams. The swarm's perfect coordination became increasingly chaotic. For every drone the humans destroyed, the others seemed to become slightly less effective. The Battle of New Dawn would be remembered as the moment when humanity proved its worth to the galaxy. Not because of superior technology or advanced tactics, but because humans could do what the crystal entities never expected: turn empty space into a battlefield and fight an enemy hand-to-hand in the vacuum of space. Commander West, standing on the surface of a shattered crystal drone, watched more human ships arrive through FTL. The tide wasn't just turning. It had turned. The Deathworlders had brought their own brand of warfare to space, and the galaxy would never be the same. Dr. Mark Thompson stood in the Thunder's lab, surrounded by crystal fragments and damaged mechanical parts. The pieces had been collected from the destroyed entities during Commander West's boarding actions. Around him, both human and luminary scientists worked together, trying to understand their enemy. "Look at this," Thompson said, pointing to a holographic display. "These aren't random crystals. They're grown, layer by layer, like a 3D printer using mineral deposits." The luminary scientist next to him, Glow, moved closer to examine the pattern. His silvery skin flickered with excitement patterns. "Fascinating. But why would anyone create such things?" Thompson picked up a damaged mechanical core. Because these were never meant to be weapons. They're mining drones. The revelation spread through the lab like a shockwave. Admiral Stone and Ambassador Reed had joined them just in time to hear it. Mining drones? Stone asked, his weathered face showing surprise. You mean we've been fighting industrial equipment? Thompson nodded, connecting his tablet to the main display. Look at these patterns in the crystal structure. They're designed to break down mineral-rich asteroids and process them. The same technology they're using to tear apart ships and stations. It was meant for mining operations. Reed's inner eyelids blinked rapidly. But why would mining drones attack populated systems? Because they're ancient, Thompson explained, bringing up more data. We found markers in their code that date back thousands of years. These things were probably part of an automated mining operation that was abandoned or lost. Over time, their programming corrupted. They started seeing everything as a potential mining target. Stone walked around the display, studying the broken drone parts. This actually makes sense. Humans had similar problems in our early days of automated mining. That's why we always build in manual overrides and strict containment protocols. The lab team had spread out various drone components on different tables. Thompson moved to one that held communication equipment. The real discovery is this. They operate on a network. Each drone is connected to all the others. They share information, resources, and objectives. Like a giant computer network, Stone nodded, understanding dawning on his face. That's why they were so coordinated in battle. Glow's skin patterns showed confusion. But if they are just mining drones, how do we stop them? Our most advanced weapons had no effect. Thompson smiled. That's because you were thinking about them as an unstoppable alien force. We humans see them as what they really are, malfunctioning machines, and machines can be broken. He brought up a new display showing the drone's communication patterns. Every time we destroy one, the others get slightly less coordinated. They're like nodes in a network. Take out enough nodes, and the network begins to fail. Stone finished. Doctor, are you saying we can beat these things by simply overwhelming their ability to coordinate? Better than that, Thompson replied. Now that we understand what they are, we can do more than just destroy them. We might be able to hack them, shut them down, or even reprogram them. Reed's skin flickered with hope patterns. You can do this, Admiral, Thompson said, turning to Stone. Remember those primitive electromagnetic pulse weapons the Luminary thought were barbaric? The ones we kept despite everyone saying they were outdated. Stone's face broke into a grin. The same ones that would completely fry any ancient electronic systems. I like where this is going, Doctor. Thompson nodded. These drones might be advanced, but their basic electronic components are still vulnerable. We've been fighting them like an unstoppable army. We should have been treating them like what they are, outdated mining equipment that needs to be shut down. The lab buzzed with renewed energy as both human and luminary scientists began working on this new approach. What had seemed like an unstoppable alien force was now revealed to be something much more manageable, a technological problem that needed a technical solution. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was solving problems that others thought impossible. Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of the Thunder, watching as his fleet moved into position. Around them, the crystal drone swarm had regrouped, their numbers still massive despite the losses they'd taken. But now, the humans had a plan. All ships report ready, sir, Officer Wright announced. EMP weapons are charged and synchronized. The luminary ships have moved to safe distance, Commander West added from her position. She had been brought back to coordinate the attack after her successful boarding missions. Stone took a deep breath. Using electromagnetic pulse weapons in space was considered barbaric by most alien races. The pulses could damage civilian communications, disable safety systems, and cause chaos across entire sectors. But right now, that's exactly what they needed. Dr. Thompson, are you certain about this? Stone asked through the comm. In the science lab, Thompson looked up from his final calculations. Yes, "Admiral, these drones are ancient. Their shielding wasn't designed to handle this kind of attack. A coordinated EMP burst should overload their systems." Ambassador Reed, who had insisted on staying aboard the Thunder, spoke up. "Admiral, if this works, we'll lose communications across the entire system temporarily." "Better than losing the entire system permanently," Stone replied. He straightened his uniform and gave the order. "All ships, execute Operation Blackout." The human fleet had arranged itself in a sphere around the main concentration of crystal drones. Each ship carried specially modified EMP weapons designed to work together for maximum effect. "EMP weapons charged to maximum," the weapons officer reported. "Ready on your mark." Stone looked at the tactical display one last time. This was humanity's moment to prove they weren't just brutal warriors. They were clever problem solvers too. Fire. The space around New Dawn lit up as dozens of electromagnetic pulse weapons fired simultaneously. The pulses combined into a massive wave of energy that washed over the crystal drone swarm. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the crystals began to dim. "Look," West pointed at the display. "Their coordination is breaking down." The crystal drones, their ancient electronic systems overwhelmed by the pulse, began to drift aimlessly. Some crashed into each other, their perfect network communication shattered. Others simply stopped moving entirely. In the lab, Thompson watched his sensors with growing excitement. "It's working. Their control systems are shutting down. The network is collapsing." But they weren't done yet. Some drones, protected by their crystal shells, were starting to recover. Stone had expected this. Second wave, fire. Another pulse swept through space. More drones went dark. The few that remained active began to move erratically, like machines running on backup systems. "Commander West," Stone ordered, "launch boarding teams. Take out any drones still moving." West's teams, already prepared, launched from their ships. They moved through the field of disabled drones, placing charges on any that showed signs of activity. This time, there was no resistance. On the Luminary Station, despite their temporary communication blackout, the observers watched in awe. The humans had taken something considered a primitive and dangerous weapon and turned it into a precise tool for victory. Status report. Stone commanded as systems began coming back online. 87% of crystal drones are completely disabled, Wright reported. The remaining 13% are damaged and no longer coordinating. Boarding teams are handling the stragglers. Thompson's voice came through the comm, excited but professional. "Admiral, we're detecting a complete collapse of their network. Without it, the remaining drones can't function as a swarm. They're just individual machines now, and not very smart ones." Stone turned to Ambassador Reed, who stood in amazed silence. "Ambassador, I believe your crystal drone problem has been solved. Though I apologize for the temporary communications disruption." Reed's skin flickered with joy patterns. "Admiral, you just saved our entire civilization. I don't think anyone will complain about a few hours without communications." The battle wasn't completely over. There would still be cleanup operations and hunting down stray drones. But the main threat was gone, defeated not by advanced alien weapons, but by humanity's primitive technology and practical problem-solving. Stone looked out at the field of disabled drones, now little more than space debris. "Send word to all ships. Operation Blackout is a success. The Deathworlders just taught the galaxy a lesson in solving problems the human way." 1 month after the Battle of New Dawn, the Great Hall of the Luminary Central Council was filled with both Luminary and humans. The crystal parts that Dr. Thompson and his team had studied now sat in display cases, serving as a reminder of the crisis they had overcome. Ambassador Reed stood at the speaking platform, his skin glowing with formal patterns. Before him sat Admiral Stone, Commander West, Dr. Thompson, and representatives from various human fleets. The gallery was packed with luminary citizens, all eager to see the Deathworlders who had saved them. Today, Reed began, his voice carrying through the hall, we correct a grave mistake. We once viewed the humans as primitive and dangerous because they came from a high-gravity world full of natural disasters. We called them Deathworlders, thinking it was a mark of shame. He paused, looking at the assembled humans with genuine respect. We were wrong. Their harsh world didn't make them primitive, it made them strong. It didn't make them dangerous, it made them capable. When we faced a crisis that our advanced technology couldn't solve, they brought something more valuable: the ability to overcome impossible challenges. Admiral Stone sat straight in his chair, his weathered face showing pride not just for himself, but for all of humanity. Reed continued, "The humans didn't just fight for us. They thought differently than us. Where we saw unstoppable alien creatures, they saw malfunctioning machines that could be beaten. Where we saw primitive weapons, they saw practical solutions. They turned our rescue mission into a learning opportunity for both our peoples." Dr. Thompson's team had already begun working with luminary scientists to understand the crystal drone technology better. They had discovered that the drones were created by an ancient mining corporation that had gone extinct thousands of years ago. Their autonomous mining fleet had continued operating, corrupting over time until it saw all matter as resources to be harvested. But perhaps the most important lesson, Reed said, was about the true meaning of civilization. The humans may build warships and create weapons, but they do so to protect others as much as themselves. When we called for help, they didn't hesitate. They didn't negotiate. They simply came. Commander West smiled, remembering how her teams had adapted to fight in space, turning the vacuum itself into their battlefield. Next to her sat several luminary officers who had already requested training in human space combat techniques. Therefore, Reed announced, the Luminary Federation proposes a formal alliance with Earth and all human colonies. We offer our advanced scientific knowledge, and in return, we ask for their experience in overcoming challenges, their practical approach to problems, and their unwavering spirit in the face of adversity. The hall erupted in applause, both human and luminary. In the weeks since the battle, human ships had helped clear out the remaining crystal drones from luminary space. The cooperation had already led to many discoveries and improvements on both sides. Stone stood to accept the alliance proposal. "Ambassador Reed, you honor us with your words. But the truth is, we humans don't help others because we expect rewards. We do it because that's what any sentient species should do. You called us Deathworlders, but perhaps a better term would be survivors. And survivors help each other." As the ceremony concluded, Reed and Stone walked together through the hall. Through the massive windows, they could see human and luminary ships docked together at the space station. "Your ships still look strange to us," Reed admitted. "All that armor and those weapon systems." Stone laughed. "And your ships still look fragile to us. But that's the beauty of this alliance. We complement each other. You show us how to be more elegant. We show you how to be more resilient. Together, we're stronger than either of us alone." The galaxy had changed. The Deathworlders had proven themselves not just as warriors, but as friends, teachers, and allies. And if another threat ever emerged from the darkness of space, everyone knew who they would call first: the survivors from Earth, who had turned their harsh evolution into their greatest strength.